Hello and welcome to another Thursday interview here on Viking.TV with me, Anne Diamond. And this week I have a rare and wonderful find for you that's something like 167 million years old. I'm glad to tell you that's not the age of my guests, but it is the age of what they found. And in this week where we're looking at world geography and maps, I'm thrilled to tell you that the way they did it was with maps and, would you believe, Google Earth. Now, I don't know if you've ever spent an hour or two or three or four perusing Google Earth and Google Maps, but it's absolutely fascinating because you can see nearly everything and sometimes in the greatest detail. Just try what everybody starts with, looking at your own neighbourhood or favourite landmarks, but you can also see what an incredibly useful tool it is for geographic and geologic experts. Just look at some of those land formations. And of course, if you're watching with a knowledgeable eye, you know what to look out for and you know what all of that means. Well, my guests today certainly know what they're looking at when they see those sorts of images and combine them with their own knowledge and experience and the very latest geological research papers. Because the first couple I'm going to introduce you to are non-professional paleontologists, yet they've made one of the largest and most important finds of exquisitely preserved Jurassic fossils ever in Britain. A find that has rocked the world, get it? Rocked the world of professional paleontology and has been hailed as evidence of a Jurassic Pompeii, yielding thousands of squiggly wiggly fossils. Just look at them and try and find a better explanation. Squiggly wiggly fossils indeed, but if you know what you're looking at, you can tell their story, and that's what I'm hoping we'll be able to do. So let's meet, first of all, fossil detectives Neville and Sally Hollingworth, and lead paleontologist at the world-famous Natural History Museum in London, Dr. Tim Ewin. All three of you, hello and welcome.
Hi, everyone. Hi. Hello.
Hey. Now, first I want to come to Neville and Sally. So first of all, congratulations. What a find. Can you describe to us, non-paleontologists, the importance of your find? And don't be modest.
Well, yeah, I mean, we were absolutely blown away by our discovery when we realised the sort of scientific importance of it and the amazing quality and preservation of these fossils in this quarry, which, as you mentioned earlier, we spotted using Google Earth, but backed up by a bit of research and looking at some old geological maps. But when we stumbled across the fossils in the bottom of the quarry, we suddenly thought, these are different. These look amazing. They were beautifully preserved, and there were lots and lots of them on the quarry floor. So that's where we started.
I said to Nev, I said, do you know anybody? That's all right. I said to Nev, do you know anybody that would really specialise in this sort of field of expertise? And he sort of said, oh, I know this guy. I wonder if he still works at the museum. So we emailed Tim a few photographs, and yeah, the journey began.
And Tim, when they got in touch with you and showed you a few of the photographs, what was your reaction?
Well, just one of overwhelming excitement. It was one of those emails that you hope to receive every day, but rarely do. Because it wasn't normally when you get a fossil out of the ground, it's it's very imperfect. You can only see a few bits and pieces. But Nev and Sally had done a little bit of prep work on it and had revealed complete examples of the fossils that they were finding, and I knew straight away that these were comparable with some of the best material that's ever been found from the Jurassic of Britain, these fossil starfish and these sea lilies. And so it was quite an easy call just to sort of make a reply saying, yes, we are interested, and if we could come and visit the site, we'd be very excited to do that. But the frustrating thing was that it came in at the end of November 2020, and then the sort of second major lockdown was announced just towards the end of December. So it was a very frustrating wait of having to homeschool and being furloughed further, and before we could actually get to the site. So it sort of made it extra special when we got in there.
Yeah, I mean, of course, you know Sally and Neville already because they are seasoned fossil hunters. We've got some lovely pictures of you both. You'll have to tell us where you are, but I presume these were all taken, Sally and Neville, when you were at various digs or various places looking for fossils.
The colder looking ones are probably from Yorkshire.
North Yorkshire, that's one of those pictures. The slightly harsher conditions up there. Yeah.
Well, you certainly do seem to have been all over the place. That was a sunnier day, obviously. But these are all places that you've been to looking where you actually knew that there might be something there. That looks like a very cold, windy one.
That'll be Yorkshire.
That'll be Yorkshire, North Yorkshire coast. We normally go up when the outside the summer season, so it's either winter or early spring, and sometimes the weather can be quite daunting. When we had the beast from the east, we went up to Yorkshire fossil collecting, and that was really challenging because the beach was frozen.
What's about that one?
Oh, making a fossil snowman.
I wondered where you were and what you were doing. And of course, that final one there is of you at the most recent site, the one that we're talking about today. Neville, I know that I said at the beginning that you are a non-professional paleontologist. It would be an insult to call you an amateur. But both of you have been at this for so long. What are your everyday jobs, though? I mean, if you're not a paleontologist, what are you both?
Well, I'm a public engagement manager for the Science and Technology Facilities Council, which is one of the UK research councils that fund a range of science areas. So my day job is looking at space science, nuclear and particle physics, astronomy, and stuff to do with what we call big facilities like light sources, work at CERN, and detection technology. So it's a whole raft of different things.
So what led you both to this obsession with fossil hunting?
That's you.
Yes. It was a childhood passion of mine. I got into fossil collecting when I was about 5 years old, and I was invited onto an archaeological dig, and that ignited my interest because they were digging in all these trenches, and I was sort of interested in what they were finding. And then when I was a bit older, I moved down to the south of England, to Yeovil in Somerset, and we were living in a new house next to a building site. So I managed to find my first fossil in the spoil from a trench in the building site. It was a sort of a curly-whirly thing called an ammonite, and that was my first proper fossil, and I never looked back.
What about you, Sally? I mean, you know your stuff about fossils now. So have you learned this as you've gone along?
I've sort of been into fossil hunting for sort of about 5 years. My day job is accounts administration for a construction company. So very different to Neville. But yeah, I enjoy the collecting, the day out, and also the preparatory side of fossil as well. So we sort of prepare our own, clean them up, bring them back to life. So that's quite a nice side of it as well. So it's the whole package, really. It's great fun.
Yeah, our garage and our workshop is basically a preparation laboratory.
Well, yes, and thank you very much. You sent us some photographs of the setup in your garage, and I must say it looks pretty professional. But I gather a lot of it is sort of dental equipment, isn't it?
That's right. Yes, our air abrasive that we use, our little micro sandblaster, is actually developed for the dental industry, and they're actually ideal for cleaning fossils. You can clean your teeth with them, and you can also clean fossils with them. We found. I wouldn't recommend.
Yes, you are hard at work. So you were actually cleaning up some of these things before you sent the pictures to Tim. So that you could, and I think you've even got some with you now, haven't you, that just show how absolutely beautiful the squiggly wigglies are. And it's you that use that term, isn't it, you, Sally?
That's right. I showed my sister a prepped fossil, and she sort of, oh, it's beautiful, it's like a squiggly wiggly, and then the terms really stuck, and I still have to apologise to Tim every time.
But they are, and as you said, the quality is incredible, isn't it? The detail you can see.
Yeah, the really interesting thing about them is that these are related to starfish and sea urchins and things like that, and their bodies are made up of lots of skeletal elements or plates, a bit like our own skeleton. So when these animals die, they normally just fall apart, a bit like we do when we die. And so their fossils are frequently disturbed, and we only find individual plates. And so to get a whole individual is really quite rare. And then to get an entire seafloor that's preserved whole, as it were, and all the individuals have got all the different elements attached is really exceptional. And so when I saw these pictures, I knew it was a really special site.
The site is in the Cotswolds, centre of England, for those who don't know England very well, more or less. But so what you have found is basically a brilliantly preserved Jurassic seafloor, yes?
Yeah.
So what is beautiful Cotswold countryside now would have been, what, an ocean then?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it not quite an ocean. So at that time there was lands probably just sort of 5-10 miles to the north. And there would have been another landmass to the east. So you imagine a sort of gap between two large continents. There's little islands in between that. Well, some are quite big islands. So we were sort of in a shallow tropical sea. So Britain at that time was much further south than it is today. So yeah, you can imagine, it being sort of quite warm and pleasant, a bit like sort of the coast of Portugal or somewhere like that, or Florida. There's also lots of fossil wood at this site, so we think that there's been a lot of wash from rivers off one of these islands, or maybe even the continents, and that would have washed a lot of wood into the site, and that's probably also washing in lots of nutrients, and that's why we've got lots of these feather stars and sea urchins and all these other wonderful echinoderms at this one site.
And of course, when you eventually did manage to get to the dig, how do you organise a dig? Who are the volunteers, or who are the people who are helping you? How do you actually even get a dig going?
The first point of call, we have to liaise with the landowners and get permission to go in there. That's sort of the the first thing. But we have a whole team of paleontologists at the Natural History Museum who have a broad range of different expertise. That includes volunteers or people who are, we call them scientific associates. We've got a couple of incredibly knowledgeable guys, and we rely on people like Sally and Nev with their local expertise to really sort of tell us where to dig, how to dig. Whilst the people might not have the subject specialism of the echinoderms, they're used to going and excavating fossils. We've got access to students, and we brought a couple of those guys along as well to help us sort of do a lot of the sort of time-consuming collecting. And the more eyes you have on the ground, the better with these things. So you organise it. I don't know. It's not quite as precise as a military operation, but we get all the kit together. We bring it all down, set up some accommodation close by, and we try and spend as much time in the quarry as possible, gently examining as much of the outcrop as possible. Really sort of following the lead from the people who collected the fossils there the most, which is in this case Sally and Anne. You're Anne, Sally and Nev.
We've got some lovely pictures of the dig. Obviously, to the untrained eye, it doesn't look very special until you guys start to unearth really interesting things. So it's quite a large area, and you have to just sort of try and imagine what it looked like 167 million years ago, and then know where to look for the right things. But certainly you started to turn over the earth, pick up some slabs, and it seems that everywhere you looked, there was something worth finding.
Yeah, that's the exceptional thing about this quarry is that normally you find one or two of these fossils and you're excited, you think you've had a good day, whereas we were able to sort of trace a specific layer across the whole bottom of the quarry, and in parts the preservation was really exceptional. We were getting fossilized starfish on top of some of these sea lilies, which were on top of sea urchins, which is really rare and exceptional finds. And yeah, we had other areas of the quarry where the preservation was sort of less good at keeping everything together, but still really important because we were able to find really sort of small fragments, which gives us lots of sort of additional information about all the different angles of these specimens.
Sally, what's it like holding something, or actually picking something out of the earth, and knowing that you are the first person to have touched that in 167 million years? How weird is it to hold something that old?
It's amazing. It is truly amazing, because these creatures have obviously, you know, been lying there for so many millions of years, and and the preservation is unbelievable when some of them just pop out of the ground, and you can hold it and think, okay, I am the first person ever in 167 million years to see this little critter, and it is truly breathtaking.
What about you, Nev? I mean, all that excitement that's been with you since you were a schoolboy, what did it feel like to see all of these fossils coming out of the earth?
Well, for me, it's like going back in time, isn't it? So you go sort of this window of opportunity with the quarry. That window opens and you can look into this ancient Jurassic seascape, and that fires up your imagination. But the other thing is that the beauty of these fossils is incredible. They're aesthetically beautiful to look at, and they also tell you a story about how they lived and how they died, and all the evidence is being pieced together now to indicate that these sea creatures, these sea lilies, sea urchins, starfish, had a rather unfortunate end, we think.
Yeah.
And that's also quite exciting, because it tells you about ancient climates as well. So that's something quite interesting, and also adds to the science, because there's new species that have been found as well. So that does add to the story.
And even the old Tim, when we were chatting to Tim, and he said, oh, you know, some of these species, even the ones that have already been discovered, haven't been researched on for over 100 years. So that to us, it's the exciting journey that's going to happen as well, of all the research that will be taking place.
Tim, tell us a bit about how these creatures lived and died, because the sheer fact that you've got this amazing find with, as you said, fossil over fossil over fossil, suggests that something catastrophic happened.
So in order to get these animals preserved, they need to be buried very quickly and in quite deep sediments. And if there's oxygen excluded from that time as well, then that's even better. These things probably were preserved in a single day, maybe even a very even shorter period of time, maybe a sort of hour. And with the living at the bottom of the sea, we think they're probably living in a sort of low-lying sort of trough in the bottom of the sea. I think I mentioned the delta, the river, bringing in nutrients, but it also brings in sediment as well. And that sediment builds up as banks, and you then have a large storm going through, and I'm sure people have experienced large storms on the sea. They can be very ferocious, and they can actually really turn up the sea floor, especially in shallower seas, which we think this environment's about. And that dislodges the sediment, and it flows off the highs into these low troughs where these animals were living, and burying them instantly. Maybe one or two of them have tumbled once or twice. Some of them have literally just laid over and just been buried straight off. So almost a sort of instant in time, 167 million years ago. I mean, it's great for us, not so great for the animals, because they obviously didn't make it. But we can see other structures from them that indicate that these animals were alive when they were buried as well, which is very interesting and tells us this sort of story about how they became to be fossilized. And the depth of the sediment is also very important, because other animals will burrow into the sediment and look for the organic matter that's within the sediment. And so if you've got no oxygen down there, then that stops them burrowing in. Obviously it's a very sort of, these animals were buried very deep, very quick, and they've not been exposed until Sally got her eager hands on them.
Exactly. I gather that some of them, not to put too fine a point on it, they're in a death pose. Their tentacles or legs or arms or whatever you call them are suddenly wrapped around protectively around the rest of their body. And that's a sign to you. Is that one? Yes. That's a sign that their death was quick and sudden and unexpected.
Yeah, so all of the creatures that we're finding today have modern representatives. So there are sea lilies alive today, and we know that when they're buried by mud, their instant reaction is to close their arms up to protect the mouth, which is in the middle of the arms. So normally they hold them open to sort of catch passing food particles in the sea current, but they don't want to get mud within the mouth because that stops them being able to feed. So they close their arms up. And then, of course, if they get knocked over by the sediment coming in a big whoosh, and they get buried, they're not able to open their arms again and dig their way out. And it's the same with some of the other creatures that we're finding there at the site. You can see some of the brittle star is sort of trying to twist its way out of its death pose, and it's the same with the feather stars. They're actually curling up their arms, which is their way of trying to protect their feeding organs. And you can see some of those really nice specimens here where they've all got their arms closed over the top of the mouth and the cup.
I'd ever feel sympathy for a fossil, but 167 million years ago, these were lovely creatures. And yes, suddenly there was this catastrophic mudslide or whatever that's captured them in time until, as you say, Sally got her hands on them.
Yeah, it's I mean, it's a wonderful thing, but that's why it's so rare, because this age of rock, occurs over a wide part of Britain. But you imagine all the chances that must have happened for the quarry to be opened in that specific site. If it was maybe a couple of 100 yards over one way or another, and it went through a different type of rock, where maybe it was one of these highs as opposed to these trophy lows, then we would never have found this site. So it's all those chances over huge time spans, and that not only sort of is an amazing thing, makes this fine thing. It also is the reason why we still need to collect fossils now, because we're still getting so much more information out of these things, and the specimens that we're finding today are better than anything that's been found in the past. So even though these species are known to science, they're based on just fractions or small parts of these creatures, not the whole thing that we've got, or they're based on one individual and we've got maybe 1,000, and that tells us far more about how much sort of individual variation there was in that population. So it's a really exciting find to be involved with, because we're just, it just has the potential to give us so much interesting information about life in the past.
We've got some pictures of what they might have looked like, because, of course, we only see the fossil, but they would have been very colourful. And a lot of them look like plants, but they were, in fact, animals.
Yeah, they're all related to they're all related to starfish and sea urchins. So yeah, they have a sort of plant-like look, because plants try and collect sunlight from above, and the feather stars and the sea lilies are also trying to catch food plankton, which normally comes from above or from the side, and so they open up these arms to capture that. Whereas the sea urchins and the sea cucumbers, the starfish will be looking on the sea floor for food, and they're a bit more familiar to people who, they're very easy to see in the rock pools and on the beach and things like that. Whereas the crinoids or the sea lilies and feather stars live in much deeper water or on reefs where you really need to snorkel, so they're a bit less familiar. But they are beautiful creatures, and these guys probably were fairly brightly coloured.
Sally and Nev, you were saying that over 100 years ago, we knew that many of these creatures existed. We've had previous fossils, but nothing quite like this before. But 3 new species have been found at your site. That's exciting in itself, isn't it?
Yes, it's truly exciting. And I think the 3 new species are brittle star, starfish, and the sea cucumber.
Might be a sea cucumber, yeah. So yeah, we're excited.
Perhaps they'll name them after you.
Well, you never know. Sally was
No, it's something. There's a way we name fossils is frequently after the people that found it, or the people that donated it, and so but there's there's great potential. So yeah, we'll be in conversation about what we should name these things once we get to that stage, but we haven't come up with any names yet.
That sounds like a promise to me. We've got some more pictures here of Mark Graham, who I think is one of the senior fossil preparators at the museum, working in depth, I suppose, to separate the different fossils from each other, because I guess if you're just given a slab, as he's working on there, you don't really know how many layers of fossils there may be inside that slab.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's also an incredibly skilled job, because you've got to approach it with the right materials in the right way. Otherwise, you end up damaging the specimens, and that might entail that you're losing scientifically important information. Unfortunately, we've got a great team of preparators involved with this project. Sally and Neville are two experts, as much as Mark is as well. So yeah, again, using this sort of dental equipment, the little miniature sandblasters and little mini pneumatic drills called air pens, but also just a sort of good old-fashioned mounted needle, and you just sort of gently exposing the fossils as you go. So it's quite a time-consuming business. Sally and Nev will probably tell you it takes them hours to get these specimens to look the way that they do. But the other really nice thing about the site is that actually finding the fossils, and from what I understand, preparing them is relatively easy in comparison to other sites. So the rock's not really hard. It's not like sort of concrete or anything like that. It's a little bit softer, and so it's easier to prepare. It's easy to get sort of that three-dimensional effect that these fossils really provide so well. So I don't know what your response to that is, Nev, but and then finding them was just was relatively easy. We just having to lift these large slabs using sort of spades and picks, as opposed to actually really having to break open the rock at all, because there's a lot of fairly soft clay that these were buried in. So it's such a great project from all these different angles.
Well, that leads me nicely into some questions we have from some viewers here. From Simon in New York. This might be a good one for you, Neville. Does that work that we've just been describing there ever get dull because it is so detailed and painstaking and slow? People like you must be very patient.
Yeah, patience is a virtue in this case. And it never gets dull, because you are revealing something for the first time since it was buried 167 million years ago. So each slab is like turning the pages of a book.
Yeah, and you don't know what you're revealing until you start seeing a small arm or a tiny crinoid stem, and it's millimetre by millimetre exposing the fossil that's underneath.
Yeah, grain by grain. It is very time consuming, but the rewards are immense, because you see something that turns into an object of beauty, but of incredible scientific importance.
Yeah.
I must say that something that surprised me, I guess not you because you've been at it for so long, is that it tells the story of a creature. And fossils to me have always just been amazing things, but they're like bits of rock almost. But to actually see what happened to these creatures that were once very beautiful and very weird and strange, and to know that something terrible happened, it tells the whole story. I actually feel an empathy.
Yes, when you're revealing sort of like the arms they are flowing, and they're sort of like trying to cover themselves, and you sort of get that feeling that they were trying to protect themselves.
Yeah, it was an ancient catastrophe. That's why I coined the term Jurassic Pompeii, because these creatures were living things, and they reacted to an environmental sort of disaster that happened locally for them, and subsequently for us they got well preserved. But like Herculaneum and Pompeii today, you see evidence that people were trying to cover up and protect themselves. The same thing happened for these poor little creatures all that time ago.
Another one for Tim, I think. Sam in New York says, at the time that these creatures, 167 million years ago, at the time these creatures were on the seabed, the Jurassic seabed, what sort of creatures were roaming the land at the time? So in the whole environmental timeline, what else was happening on the planet?
Well, lots of exciting things. So, of course, it was Jurassic's the time of the dinosaurs, and this age of rock is actually equivalent to a very famous dinosaur-bearing bed in America called the Morrison Formation. It's only about 1 million years younger, and so it gives us a really fascinating insight into this sort of the global sort of diversity of life. So the land, so during the Jurassic was the sort of time when the world was quite warm and quite equitable, and so there was lots of luxurious vegetation, forests covering the land surface, and then within those forests there would have been these really large dinosaurs like the long-necked, long-tailed Diplodocus. Some of the really classic ones that you know from school, like Stegosaurus, would have been stomping around. And there would have been creatures like Allosaurus, which were the two-legged meat-eating dinosaur that looked a bit like Tyrannosaurus Rex, but was a bit smaller and maybe about 100 million years older. So just to give you an idea of how long dinosaurs have been on the planet for. So yeah, it was a fascinating time. In the seas, they would have been rich with ichthyosaurs and the sort of Loch Ness monster type plesiosaurs and things like that. Of course, the Loch Ness monster is anyway, that's not proved with fact or anything like that, but that's gives people an idea of what these creatures actually look like. There was that other interesting creatures alive at the time, like ammonites, these sort of swirly curlies or whatever they're described as. And these had squid-like heads, and they would be going around catching fish. There were also sharks and other creatures. So it's a wonderful time to be alive if you're a fossil. There was it was a very rich and diverse environment. We've got some fantastic fossils from that time which contextualize these the fossils that we found at this site. But also it emphasizes that this site is adding us so much more information to that great picture that we've got already. And that's the sort of other wonderful thing about paleontology and these sorts of new discoveries, because we're forever enhancing our understanding of what the world was like at that time. And then, why it's changed today, and those changes also inform about how the world might change in the future. So we're facing a global catastrophe at the moment with the loss of biodiversity and climate change. And so it's interesting to see how the world has recovered from those sorts of perturbations in the past, and what the problems we might be able to see in the future. And so that's why paleontology still has this huge relevance today, as well as just being, some wonderful rocks or shaped stones that tell us about the past.
Frank in Delaware says, will all those fossils go on show? Because you do hear that lots of museums just keep them hidden away.
We have no desire to hide anything away. But at the same time, there are no plans to put these specimens on display straight away. We need to do a lot of research to understand what these things tell us. But we will be sharing what we're finding out as we're preparing specimens. Stuff like this will be released on the various social media channels from the museum broadcasts from. So we're going to sort of really continue to tell this story. This is not the end. This is really the beginning of the journey. And there will be publications coming out which about this site that people will be able to access in the future. So yeah, there's lots we can do other than physically just put them on display in the museum. because it's of global significance. We want to share these finds with everybody. So really, and the social media allows us to do that really effectively.
Yeah, and well, if you can't get to the Natural History Museum, you can always go to Neville and Sally's living room there, because Tim in County Cork says, "What's that behind you in all of those cabinets? Those are those all your finds?"
Yeah, just some of them actually. We've got a whole lounge full of fossils, but yeah, the finds are all mostly local, and we go out and scour pits and quarries and man-made sites where they've been digging trenches and laying pipes, things like that.
As well as the coast.
As well as the coast. Yeah. So we've actually kind of almost run out of space, actually. So yeah, it's got that.
Got the same problem the museum's got.
Yes, that's true.
Another one for you, Tim. Marianne and Bill in California say, why is it so important to keep the site secret?
The site's on private property, so I'm sure everybody who owns some land, feels that ownership, and they don't want just anybody turning up and roaming across their backyards and taking things off your land. So that's really the sort of the prime reason for it. Also, the site, we haven't finished exploring it fully yet. We've done a lot of work on there, but there's still some to go. So we don't want any sort of damage happening to it. It's also a quarry, working quarry, and there's sort of health and safety issues. So again, it's worth keeping the site quiet at the moment. So for all those reasons, to ensure that people are safe, the fossils are safe, and that there's no loss of scientific data.
Does the weather ever, well, this is one from Moira in Penn, does the weather ever get in the way of a dig, and do you have to work to a deadline if you know bad weather is coming?
Yeah, there's often a pressure there, and the weather does cause damage, which is why we take them out of the ground. I mean, apart from the ease of studying these things, because they will just eventually turn back into clay and dust. Which is a terrible shame when you're looking at the quality of preservation of some of the things we've got here. So, fossil hunting is really important, and it's to ensure that we understand the past as best as we can. And so, yeah, there often is. We can have deluges of rain, and it causes flooding of the site. We have to get pumps and pump everything out, and then we can start digging again. But also, bits and pieces can be washed away during those flooding events and things like that. So it can dislodge other parts of the quarry, and they can slump down and bury the site as well. So yeah, the site is also really clay rich, so it also makes it really difficult to see the fossils, because if it becomes really muddy, all the mud just covers the. You can see a great picture here of all the mud's really covering the fossils, and we're having to sort of actually wash all the fossils as we're finding them, just to make sure we're getting some really good stuff. And Jeff and he's cleaning off some fossils there. So it can be a bit of a problem. But at the same time, the rain can actually wash out and produce things which were otherwise hidden. So we often try and go back to sites after it's rained, because it can just reveal something that was just hidden under maybe a centimetre or a millimetre of mud, and it could be a really important thing. So we found lots of actually the new species of starfish was found in this way. It was washed clean after a rain, and it was picked up and on the surface, and there it was, beautiful.
I absolutely get now why you, particularly Sally and Nev, why you find it so exciting. You've told a wonderful story. You have literally uncovered a brilliant story. You must be very proud.
Yes.
And are you already on Google Earth and Google Maps now, looking for new places to look at?
Yes, we're still carrying on with our research, and we combine looking at old literature that was published 100+ years ago by our Victorian predecessors, and maps that we and geological maps as well. So we combine all of that, and then use the latest satellite images on Google Earth and maps to then try and pin down and locate new quarries, which you can see, which is fantastic.
Absolutely incredible. You tell a wonderful story and you've done wonderful work. And tell us, please come back to us and tell us more if you do any more exciting digs and find anything stunning. And Tim, I know we want to come back to you and ask you one day about your work with the Natural History Museum. So thank you so much for joining me today. Like I said, I never thought I'd feel empathy, sympathy and wonder so much about a sea cucumber or something like. It's astonishing, isn't it? Absolutely brilliant what you've done. Thank you so much for telling us that story. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you. And let me just tell you that next week I'm going to be introducing you to a man who has spent much of his life continuing a tradition that started almost 500 years ago as the director of music at Oxford University, master of the famous cathedral choir, and honorary father figure, if you like, to hundreds of little choristers. They sung their way into history, and that includes my own sons. There he is. It's Stephen Darlington. I'm very proud to call him a friend, going right back to my own school days. He's now retired, so he can tell us all the info about what it was like living that sort of tradition. So that's next week. Until then, keep smart, keep safe, keep dry, I hope, and have a great week. Bye-bye.